convene the meeting. And I guess the next thing I do is get approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Anybody read the minutes? Any changes or a motion to approve?
This is Nancy Bell. I would move to approve the minutes of the last meeting as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Okay. All who approves, say hi or Y or A. Okay, hands up. Hands are going up. Okay, anybody opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Are there any adjustments to the agenda for today?
Chair, there are not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Anybody in the group have anything? Do any of the MPC members have any announcements for the committee? Pretty quiet bunch. Okay, now we're going to go move on to comments from the audience. And anybody wishing to comment, raise their Zoom virtual hand. And then Paul will call on the order of raising hands. The process now involves temporarily moving each speaker to Zoom panelist status, so there'll be a transition time between each speaker. So you see any hands out there?
Yes, Chair, I am in the I'm in the process of promoting Mr. Zako to a panelist, and I believe he wants to speak during public comments. So Rob, as soon as you are moved over and have access, please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Mo, members of the Metropolitan Policy Committee. Can you hear me?
Great to hear you. Good.
Thank you. It is my privilege to invite you all to an event that ARP Oregon and BEST are presenting this coming Monday, the future of transportation with retired Congressman Peter DeFazio, LTD General Manager Jameson Otten, and Portland Metro Regional Government President Lynn Peterson. It's going to be from 4:30 to 7 at the Ford Alumni Center, and I know some of you are already signed up. I apologize in advance to the cities of Eugene and Springfield. I recognize that Mondays are when you have council meetings, but this Monday evening was actually the only time all spring term that U of O and the 3 speakers were available. We will be recording the event, and there'll be follow-up to that. So I apologize, but I just want to let you all know that that's happening, and hope that many of you can attend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Any other hands raised?
Chair, I am checking now, and I see no one else from the public wishing to speak.
Okay, then I guess we can move on to the
Chair.
I'm sorry, please.
Forgive me, this is Lucy Venice. I'm on my cell phone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm on my cell phone, and so I'm slow to respond to things. And I did have a couple of City of Eugene announcements. I just wasn't able to get to the right place at the right time for that.
You're listening.
So a couple of things, a very exciting update from the city, which is that we've launched our new electric scooter pilot program, Super Pedestrian. And they rolled out their silver and yellow e-scooters just last Friday on March 31st. We started with 200 e-scooters and we'll ramp up to a full fleet of 600 in the coming months. And the scooter program will serve the entire city of Eugene, prioritizing safety, accessibility, sustainability, and equity. So we're very excited about that. It includes some seated e-scooters that are more accessible to older riders or people with disabilities, and the service it contains the whole city limits, the University of Oregon campus, and they're operated by Cascade Mobility. And so we're very excited about that. And then the second announcement is that we've initiated a public process called Move Huge EUG, to program approximately $13 million in funds from our recently voter approved street bond. And so this is encouraging folks to participate in that public engagement process. Funds will be spent on projects that enhance walking and biking and that make our seats safer for all modes of travel. So we're asking people to identify locations where they feel unsafe or find walking or biking challenging, as well as for ideas to address those concerns. And so just a couple of quick updates. There is we're having an open house on as part of this public engagement at the Farmers Market Pavilion on Thursday, April 20th from 4:30 to 7. So again, that's on Move Huge, April 20th, 4:30 to 7. Hope people will show up. Thank you.
Thank you, Marivinus. Any other hands show up, Paul?
Let me take a quick second look here, and I am not seeing any. Thank you.
All right. Then our next agenda item is the God, where is it here? Air quality community determination. Okay, the draft of the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program and air quality conformity determination. Who's presenting that?
Chair, that would be Dan Collister from LCOG. Dan, if you're ready.
Yeah, your name's on here. Let's see.
Well, thank you. I'm Daniel Collister. This is the 2024-2027 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program and the Air Quality Conformity Determination. So the Transportation Planning Committee has requested a public hearing today for these two items. I'd like to first present an overview of both of them to you. So the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or MTIP, or TIP, is one of the basic documents required of all MPOs. It's essentially the plan for implementing the goals and the objectives of the Regional Transportation Plan over the next 4 fiscal years. And a key component of the MTIP is the project list, which in our draft begins on page 24. Excuse me. It lists the projects in the MTIP for which federal funding has been secured, including projects that the MPO has prioritized and selected to utilize the roughly $30 million or so of the MPO discretionary federal funds. The process by which these projects are prioritized and selected is documented in the MTIP. It links the goals and objectives of the regional transportation plan to funding decisions. It defines the process for making adjustments to projects in the MTIP. It links projects and funding to the federal performance targets, describes the consideration of these projects toward environmental justice in Title VI. It includes a demonstration of financial constraint, ensuring that all the funding is accounted for and that sufficient funding is available to complete all the projects that are included in the MTIP. In summary, it satisfies all the federal requirements of Title 23 CFR 450.326, which is the requirements of MPOs for the development of their MTIPs. I do want to note that there aren't any funding decisions being proposed as part of this MTIP approval. So often in the past, our call for projects has culminated in the final approval of an MTIP, which essentially acts as the mechanism for project selection and approval. That's not the case with this MTIP. Those of you who were involved in MPC last year will remember that we undertook our project solicitation in the spring and summer prior to the development of this MTIP. Those projects are included in this draft. This document also includes LTD's federal program of projects for 24 through 27. And the public review process for this MTIP also satisfies the federal requirements for LTD's program of projects. Finally, since the MTIP lays out the MPO's programming and funding processes, developing a new MTIP provides an opportunity to review those processes, to propose changes. I want to bring to your attention a proposed change that is reflected in the draft 24-27 MTIP regarding the processes here at the MPO. This was recommended by TPC. On page 9 of the draft, it presents the MPO TIP approval matrix. So project information in the MTIP has to be kept current to maintain fiscal constraint. So corrections and adjustments and amendments to TIP projects are needed constantly. So the MPO TIP approval matrix specifies which MPO body has the authority to approve requested TIP changes based on the nature of those changes. The updated matrix, the one included in this draft, includes one substantive addition that is being proposed. So currently, MPC has to approve the initial programming of any MPO discretionary funding. The updated matrix would allow TPC to approve initial programming of off-cycle funds to projects or scopes already in the TIP. So there are a number of qualifiers in there. Let me explain that a little bit. So off-cycle refers to the mostly unanticipated federal funds that come to the MPO, either as federal redistribution or by other means. These reflect much smaller amounts than the annual allocations and will sometimes need to be programmed and obligated within a matter of weeks due to the nature of the funding. By allowing TPC the authority to approve programming these types of funds, as long as they're going to support projects already approved by MPC for inclusion in the TIP, it provides the MPO with options for programming when limited time is available and the funds might otherwise be lost, which could happen in some cases. So under all circumstances, the MPO would adhere to the federal requirements for public engagement and subject all funding requests to the scrutiny of the primary funding considerations approved by MPC in the 2045 RTP. I know that was a lot really quick. If it's okay, I think I'll go ahead and present the air quality conformity determination. And,
let me clarify.
Questions at the end. I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
Clarify something.
Yes.
I believe you said you've modified the TIP approval matrix, and the one in our packet is the modified one, correct?
That's correct. On page 9, it's the fifth item down on that list.
I got noise in the background. So when we make a motion later, that's what we'll be using. Thank you. Not a motion, but yeah, okay, you will. Thanks.
Yeah. The air quality conformity determination, or AQCD, this is a companion piece to the MTIP. So the Eugene Springfield area is subject to the conditions of a limited maintenance plan for air quality until 2033. Those conditions require that any new RTP or any new MTIP must be accompanied by a federally approved air quality conformity determination. What the AQCD does, it documents air quality conditions as they relate to specific pollutants and describes how the projects in the MTIP are expected to impact air quality. Those pollutants in our case are simply just particulates of 10 microns or less, also called PM10. It's essentially wood smoke and dust. So LRAPA, the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency, provides us with updated air quality data. They've confirmed that PM10 levels in this area consistently remain below the national ambient air quality standards, and that transportation is not a significant producer of PM10 in this area. The AQCD documents that. An interagency consultation was convened with air quality professionals and representatives from various federal, state, and regional agencies. The group reviewed each project in the MTIP one by one and determined ultimately that all projects qualified for the exemption status from conformity to the requirements of the Clean Air Act and amendments, except one project, that was Lane County's Airport Road Pavement Preservation Project. However, it was agreed by the committee that although that project was not categorically exempt, it was not thought to be a project of local air quality concern. So for both of these documents, a 30-day public comment period is currently open. Through April 16th, there has been at least one comment received to date. It wasn't received in time to include it in your packet today, but that, along with any others that are received, will be compiled, provided to TPC for their April meeting, and included in the May MPC packet. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but again, what's being requested today is a public hearing, a single public hearing for both of these documents that we appreciate.
I have a question.
Please.
my company developed a lot of air monitoring equipment a few years ago, and PM10 was the standard at that time. And then they changed it to 2.5. We modified everything for 2.5, but everything I see is for 10 microns now. Why is that?
What I can tell you is that those are treated as two separate pollutant categories. And while this area had violated the standards for PM10, we had not violated the standards for PM 2.5.
Okay. So, okay. I know 2.5 is pretty stringent. So, thank you. Others. I lost my agenda. Is that your report now?
Chair, if that's the end of Dan's staff presentation, we do need to hold a public hearing on this agenda item. If you could open the public hearing.
Okay, I wasn't sure whether he was finished or not.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to open the public hearing for what we just discussed before. And Paul, if you can see anybody virtually that we need to call on, or anybody in the committee, I suppose.
Thank you, Chair. I see Mr. Zako again with his hand raised, so I'm in the process again of granting him access. And Rob, when you have that, please go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning again. Perhaps in my haste before, I failed to identify myself. I'm Rob Zako, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the MTIP and the air quality conformity determination. As I understand these things, there's a bargain between the federal government and all of you. They give you money in exchange for you doing various things and reports and following regulations to keep that money. The MTIP and the air quality conformity determination are two of those important items that you're required to approve. And your good staff has gone through and presented with you those documents to approve. And that's all fine. And to the extent that it matters, BEST supports all that. But this is a public hearing, and I have to say it's a strange kind of public hearing because I have nothing to say to you, and I'm not sure that there's anything I could say to you that make any difference. There are no decisions here, as was just explained to you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's kind of weird to have a public hearing when you don't really have anything to hear from the public. We're going to be following up with your staff and eventually with you to try to understand where are the key decision points, where can the public engage in discussions around transportation priorities and funding, and how to do that in a way that's robust and welcoming. This apparently is not that point, and that's fine. You're making essentially an administrative decision, and I think your staff has done a good job, and BEST supports that. Thank you very much.
Rob, you're not having anything to say. It's pretty unusual, that's for sure. Anybody else, Paul?
Let me do a final check here, Chair. And no, I am not seeing anybody else indicating they wish to testify during this public hearing.
Then I will close the public hearing. Questions and discussion by MPC members? Just quiet as Rob. Okay, action requested. We just did that, provided feedback. So I guess we go on to the next agenda item. The draft of the 24-25 Unified Planning Work Program. And staff presentation.
Chair, thank you again. Ellen Courier will be leading the presentation on this, and I believe she's going to share her screen. I know that she has a PowerPoint to guide us through this discussion.
Guys hear me?
Ellen, you're very faint. Can you?
Take my headphone out and see if that. Can you hear me better?
Yep.
That way? Okay, great. Let me get this PowerPoint set up and you all can see the PowerPoint. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief presentation before we do a public hearing, and we'll have time for questions and follow-up as well. This is our Unified Planning Work Program, which is our 2-year work program. We do an addendum in the 2nd year for any changes that we might have. And the document covers our ongoing work as well as any new projects. And it's a key way we communicate with our partners, particularly our state and federal partners, to demonstrate where we are in the planning process. So I'm going to go over these key activities so you can get a sense of what things might be coming your way for review and adoption. And then also highlight the way that these projects tie into our long-range planning efforts. So before I jump into that, I wanted to point out this table that is on page 7 of the document. It's kind of a good cheat sheet to see where we are with each of our planning documents, the current status, and when the next update will occur. So for those of you that are new, that aren't familiar with all of our planning documents, save this table. You can refer back to it. I think it's a good overview. Okay, so the UPWP that we're reviewing today covers July 1st of this year to June 30th of 2025. It's broken up into our program areas, which you'll see listed here. And I did want to point out that the first one is our long-range planning, but all of the following activities or program areas are ways that we implement that long-range plan. So I'll loop back to that in each of the slides. So our key products and activities for long-range planning are clearly our long-range plan, our RTP. We adopted that in January of 2022. We also had an intelligent transportation system and congestion management plan as part of that adoption. So we will be updating those, all 3 of those in 2025. And then I put in this diagram here so that you could see the process for an RTP update. And we are pretty much always in data preparation and analysis. So we're almost always working on an RTP in some fashion. And once we get to a point where we have our planning year horizon, we're able to move into vision and goal setting in collaboration with our committees, as well as prioritizing projects and drafting an RTP. So that's what you'll expect to come for the next 2025 adoption. Some things that came out of the last RTP that we're currently working on are some grant writing to expand resiliency planning, an electric vehicle strategy, and active transportation data. That was a gap that we realized in our last update, that we need to improve our systems for creating and maintaining those data. So those are things that we're currently working on for our adopted RTP, as well as continuing the data work. Performance-based planning. In November of last year, we had ODOT come and present on some of the work that they're doing around the adopted federal performance measures. We're going to continue to collaborate with them on those, as well as our regionally adopted performance measures. And finally, safety planning. In February, Drew came to talk about our Safe Lane Coalition work, which is a key way that we implement our current safety plan. So we're going to continue to do that work that is focused on programming and education to reduce crashes in our region. And we're beginning the preparation work for an update to that safety plan, hopefully coming at the end of 23 or 24. Okay, programming and implementation. This is something that MPC sees a lot of, as you just heard from Dan about the 24-27 tip, or the MTIP. So we will be reviewing and adopting that transportation improvement program for our MPO. We'll continue to maintain those with amendments as necessary. And then you do see an annual list of obligated projects that usually comes at the beginning of the year once that fiscal system is closed out. We are working on an ETIP platform implementation. So the picture in this slide is a preview of what that could look like. That's going to improve the ability to track and report projects, provide better public transparency. So this is just a sampling of what that could look like. And then, of course, the Unified Planning Work Program, which we're talking about right now, we do some reporting associated with that, and then you'll see an addendum next year. Public participation, this is one of our more vintage plans, but we are currently updating it to include better incorporation of technology, as well as some improvements to outreach that we worked on during our last RTP. For those of you that were here, you might recall that we did some direct outreach to communities with concentrations of poverty, disability, and limited English proficiency. We did both direct mail outreach as well as partnering with some community-based organizations. So we're going to update the plan to include those methods. We're also going to better describe the relationship between how our partner agencies develop project lists and how those project lists get incorporated into our RTP. So those are kind of the key things that you'll see in that next public participation update. We also have a long planned and recently launched Youth Advisory Council. It launched in 2023. This includes students from 4J, Springfield, Pleasant Hill, and Sayusla School District. There's 12 members. They're working on MPO planning support as well as Safe Routes to School collaboration. So that's very exciting. And we hope to have maybe not a presentation, but a conversation with them and NBC in the coming months. And then Title VI plan we adopted last year, at the end of last year in 2022. Our next update for that will be 2025. This plan outlines how the MPO meets the requirements of the Title VI Act, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and that prohibits the discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin for programs that receive federal funding. So we have a current plan for that, but we will see an annual report in October, and we'll continue to maintain the census data and mapping for that. Okay, I mentioned the modeling work and the data maintenance work. That's kind of ongoing things that we consistently do. Network data for all modes, our land use data, census data, employment data. We'll have integration of 2020 census data and potential MPO boundary updates as well. For our model software right now, we're using Urban Sim for land use. M is our travel model, and Vision Eval is a more high-level scenario planning tool. And then we have staff that participate in the Oregon Modeling Steering Committee. One of those products that they're working on is the Oregon Travel Survey Study, Oregon Travel Study, which you will probably see a presentation on, and development of an activity-based travel model. And of course, our data portal. This is where we try to make as many data sets available to the public as possible. Oops, sorry, I'm on 2 screens, so accidentally advanced the slide before I was ready. Okay, so transportation options. This is a key area that we implement congestion management, equity, safety, and environmental goals. These programs help manage demand across our system, educating students and the public on different ways to get around the community than single occupancy vehicle. The key products that are currently part of this program are our Get There platform. This is a partnership with ODOT. It's a trip planning tool that focuses on transit, carpooling, biking, walking, and telecommuting. There's a statewide challenge in October, and then our region has recently started using it for May is Bike Month as well. Safe Routes to School programs. We have coordinators in 4J, Bethel, Springfield, and rural Lane County now. These are funded through our MPO discretionary funds, the school districts, and ODOT Safe Routes to School. And we'll continue that collaboration with our youth council as well. Eco Rural implementation. This is a DEQ program that has been in Portland and is now expanding to other MPO areas, focusing on large employers of 100 or more employees. The rules have not been finalized, so we don't know a lot of the details, but our region is continuing to collaborate on those. Smart Trips programming. So this is our individualized marketing program where you do direct outreach with residents, employees to provide information and programming to incentivize people to use non-single occupancy vehicle trips. So City of Eugene is doing a new movers campaign focusing on people that have just moved to the region, and LCOG is working in Springfield with the Gateway area. And the final part of our transportation options program is congestion management outreach. This is a partnership with ODOT focused on providing information to people who are impacted by construction projects. All right, intergovernmental coordination, that's the work that we're doing right now, our committee work and our collaboration with other statewide committees. And then I'll just point out 3 other things here as at the end of the document. We've got our funding table, special projects, which are other regionally significant projects from our partner agencies, and then our certification review findings. And we will have another certification review coming up this year in the fall. So that was a super quick rundown of a 90-page document. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. Or if there are particular topics that you were interested in, it'd be great to let our staff know so that we could come back with more in-depth presentations on that program area.
Paul, do you have anything to add to this?
Chair, Ellen did a fantastic job. I think I'm just going to mention two quick things. First of all, you know, the Unified Planning Work Program is, again, one of the requirements of NPOs at the federal level, and it's intended not just to inform the policy board, about what the NPO will be doing in the coming year or years, but it's also intended as a document for the public to see the unified, thus the title, transportation planning work happening in the metropolitan region. It's supposed to be the place where we pull together not just the NPO work, but what we call the special projects, the projects that are being done by the individual jurisdictions within the NPO, so that the public can get an overall view of those things. And then the other thing I'll say is that the UPWP, we always take to a fairly in-depth review with US DOT, both Federal Highways and Federal Transit Administration, and ODOT. That happened a month and a half ago or so. They provided all of their input and comments. Those have been incorporated into this draft, and it does satisfy both the state and federal agencies. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. And okay, I see two hands up. Mayor Van Gordon.
That was a really quick and really great presentation. I was a little bit disappointed that we don't use SimCity as a modeling platform, but you know.
Well, Urban Sim kind of sounds like SimCity, so.
My kid at heart is just disappointed. The only places I would love to see more information is, I know that they're going to target the Gateway area for trip reduction. I'd love to hear a little bit more information about that. Obviously not now, but at some point, if somebody could get back to me, that would be great. The other piece that I keep thinking about this from a public perspective is these are dense, thick planning documents, right? So especially going forward into the sort of into a unified work plan is just maybe something simpler to try to explain all of this to the public at the 900,000 foot level that they sort of care about, that we're all trying to work together through this. And more broadly, and maybe you can comment to this, I know LCOG is sort of moving in the direction of having centralized data sets, right? Trying to, as we get more sort of data visualization tools that are out there, trying to make it easier for other groups to not have to reinvent the wheel. How are we letting them know that? And how are we making progress towards, right, kind of being the place where you come to get transportation data?
Okay. I have one other hand up, and that's Vidal Francis. There you are.
Okay. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. One of the things I did hear in the presentation that I'm interested in listening to or knowing more about is the Youth Advisory Council, I believe is what it's called. It's interesting to see how we are trying to engage those, let's just say, younger minds to think of the importance of our transportation system, how it affects them, how it impacts their daily route routines, the things that they do, both not only on a collegiate level, but also on your I would say middle school, high school, and even elementary level. I just wanted to be interesting to see how that's kind of going for the makeup there, and how you're trying to address those concerns that each of those levels may have.
Yeah, and that's actually a conversation I'd love to have with you all, probably not now, but we just started the council in March, and it's kind of amazing to see how engaged and knowledgeable our young people are. And I know specifically a lot of them are interested in policy. And so I would love to have a conversation with you all about ways that we can engage together, MPC and the Youth Council, that feel valuable to both groups.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Anybody else on the group? Then I'm going to open the public hearing to get comments from the public. And this is where I go to Paul, see if he's got any hands.
Chair, thank you again. And no surprise, there is one member of the public that would like to comment, and that is Mr. Zako. However, for some reason, my Zoom is not allowing me. Ellen, I believe you're a co-host. Can you make it so Rob Zako can speak, promote him?
I think so. I clicked the button.
Maybe you can hear me, but not see me now.
There you are.
Fine.
Rob, yes, we can hear you fine.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Rob.
it's Rob Zako again. You know more or less what I look like. I'm Executive Director, Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. I want to follow up on the comments that Paul and Mayor Van Gordon made. First of all, Paul said that these administrative processes are required processes. The development of a unified planning work program does provide a useful function of just keeping the public informed of all the different things that the MPO is doing and having that in one place. And that in and of itself is useful. But I think I agree with Mayor Van Gordon. It's a little bit useful, but it's kind of dense. And if really the point of this is in part to let the public know all the different planning processes going on, some sort of Reader's Digest version or summarized version of that would be more useful to the public. It's dense for even me, and I think that the average person in the community doesn't take the time to know what you're doing. It's a question of transparency. You spend taxpayer money, it would be helpful for the taxpayers to know how you're spending that money. Those aren't criticisms, just observations. Again, this is sort of an administrative required process for you. But since this is a public comment period, I will make two comments. First of all, one of the biggest decisions you make that's in the Unified Planning Work Program is the Regional Transportation Plan. That was last adopted last year in January. It's required to be adopted every 4 years, and so it's scheduled to be adopted again in 2026. Although, as some of you may recall, last time around, the clock kind of ran out, and the public had questions and concerns that weren't addressed because you had to adopt that in order to keep federal funds flowing. There was some discussion last year that you were going to continue the conversation with yourselves, with the public, and we haven't seen that happen, frankly. Right. I'm not necessarily saying that that needs to happen now, but at the very least, I hope that the clock doesn't run out again in 2026. So we can get ahead of the curve. And when the public does have concerns about policy, that there's adequate time to incorporate that. The second thing I'll say, which is echoing comments I made before, there are questions and concerns about how to do the public process better. Ellen spoke to this. Part of the work plan is to do an update of the public participation plan. And I will say that BEST and others that we're talking to are interested in participating in that update. It's really an issue of right sizing. What does the public need? What's their appropriate role? When is it more informing them? When is it more getting input from them, and how to do that? So we look forward to having that conversation with your staff and then as appropriate with you. In terms of adopting the Unified Planning Work Program, it looks fine. Go for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have any other hands raised, Paul?
Chair, I am not seeing anyone else wishing to testify during this hearing.
Okay, then I will close the public hearing. And action is just conduct public hearing and provide feedback. So we don't have to do anything after this. Next item, legislative update. And presenter is Paul Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a few things to convey today. As many of you are probably aware, we're now well into the Oregon legislative session and several deadlines have passed. So the bills originally introduced that I reviewed with you back in January have been winnowed down quite a bit. There are only a few left, if you will, with life on that transportation related list, but a few of those are actually moving forward with some speed. So I'm going to show you a couple of documents and talk about a couple of those quickly. Let me share my screen here, and See if I can pick the right document first. Okay, are you able to see the document I've put up? Okay, so this document is, if you recall, at last month's meeting in early March, we came to you with what were then OMPOC's, the Oregon MPO Consortium's draft legislative priorities, and asked for your input so that OMPOC at a special meeting later in March could finalize the legislation that they wish to take a position on. What I have in front of you now is really the results of that March OMPOC meeting and how that discussion went. So let me just go through that real quick. HB 2101 here, which was the fund exchange legislation supporting and requiring ODOT to continue their fund exchange program with local jurisdictions, received support from OMPOC and is part of OMPOC's final position. HB 2677, which is a bill that would require ODOT to have a funding plan for maintenance whenever they added new capacity, did not receive support from OMPOC. Let me clarify real quickly that OMPOC's tradition is that all members of the consortium must support something in order for OMPOC to take a position on it. And in this case, both Portland Metro and the Middle Rogue MPOs had concerns with this piece of legislation, therefore it was removed from OMPOC's position paper. HB 2095, which is the local photo radar legislation, continues to be supported by OMPOC in their final position paper. And that piece of legislation also includes the local speed limit setting change that would allow more flexibility for local jurisdictions to set speed limits. HB 3113 also received support from all OMPOC members, and so it remained a priority in the end. And let me switch to the second page here. HB 2619, which would have modified the membership of the Oregon Transportation Commission, had concerns from the Middle Rogue MPO, so it was removed from OMPOC's position paper. Mm-hmm. The set of bills in general here that were bills around trying to collect equitable revenue from electric vehicles generally received support from OMPOC. Again, OMPOC did not specifically support any one bill, since there's a number of bills, and in fact, those are still in flux currently, but OMPOC still supports the position to have electric vehicles pay their share for wear and tear and use of the system, since they won't be paying through the traditional fuel tax. And then finally down here, Senate Joint Resolution 2, which was or is the joint resolution to expand the constitutional limitation on the use of the fuel tax and other revenue, had concerns from the Corvallis MPO and the Middle Rogue MPO, so it was removed from OMPOC's final position. Now I'm going to quickly stop sharing that, or actually go to a different document that I want to share, if I can get the right one up here. I want to focus in on House Bill 3113. Hopefully you can now see this document in front of you. House Bill 3113, as I mentioned a minute ago, is one of the positions that OMPOC did agree to support in March. And in fact, it's a position that not only you, but I think some of your local
Oops.
I drafted this written testimony on behalf of OMPOC, and it is submitted for tonight's public hearing.
Our last
for this position in support of House Bill 30.
You're breaking up, Paul. Okay. Can we get Paul hooked up better? Anybody?
Nope, I think we've lost him.
Okay. I wanted to mention one thing about this. On the MPC meeting we had last, we discussed these legislative possibilities. And we picked out some that we sort of liked and didn't like. And then we had a special OMPC meeting after that, in which we passed those recommendations on along with the other MPCs. And so those are reflected in the letter that you can't see right now. You there, Paul?
Chair, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I apologize. For some reason, Zoom disconnected me and took a minute to reconnect. I would love to resume if I can where I think I left off.
Okay.
If you can see the OMPOC testimony on HB 3113, I wanted to point out that that OMPOC supported the addition of something that MPC specifically requested last month, which is in the last paragraph here, which is that OMPOC supports making the Great Streets funding available not just for state highways under ODOT's jurisdictions, but also for local streets that serve as community streets. In particular, former ODOT-owned highways that have been transferred to local jurisdictions but are still part of the state highway system. So that did become part of OMPOC's official position. That I think was, again, of importance to you. I'd like to ask MPC, and I apologize for this sort of being a last minute request, but again, tonight's public hearing was only scheduled earlier this week, or at the last minute after the MPC packet. I'd like to ask MPC today if you would like me to submit written testimony from the Central Lane MPO supporting this position also. And again, you indicated that you supported this as part of OMPOC, but if you would like me to also submit written testimony for tonight's position or tonight's hearing from the Central Lane MPO, that would only further reinforce the support. Mayor Van Gordon?
So I guess I have a question about the bill itself. The $100 million in new fund, like, is that new sort of incremental funding to ODOT and wouldn't offset any allocation that they would have for current operations?
Correct. Although this could change the way the bill currently is written, it would be an allocation of new funding for the program. And really, that $100 million is a number that a number of other organizations around the state, such as the Street Trust, have been supporting. That could change.
Okay. I think the key thing for me was that it was not impacting ODOT's other sort of, commitments or obligations or other programs ODOT has. Like, if it's incremental, I'm good with it.
Idle Francis?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to kind of acknowledge exactly what the mayor just said there. Obviously, the funding has to come from somewhere. If it's not already there, it has to come from somewhere. And I think to Paul's description there, it's to be determined where that additional funding or whatever that additional amount is comes from. Obviously, these legislatures, they're doing the best they can to figure out how best to improve our streets and so forth. But again, this is a decent ask. But again, more to come as far as where that additional funding would actually come from.
And Mayor and Vidal, if I may just be clear, Mayor, to your question, the legislation as currently written to fund this says that it would be a transfer out of the general fund. So that would be additional funding that would not impact ODOT's current funding.
Correct. And I think that's the key that I'm supportive of, is that if we have more dollars coming in for safety and other investments that is sort of new to ODOT's current programming, we've got ODOT stretched about 5 ways to Sunday right now, then that's, I think that's beneficial. If it's sort of like slice off a piece of the pie that ODOT already has without the context of what's getting sliced off, that would be harder to support.
Okay. Anything else, Paul?
Well, Chair, if I may, and again, I understand this is...
I'm going to carry on, so don't worry. You go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, I was asking a minute ago if MPC would like me to submit essentially this same testimony as from the Central Lane MPO. So I guess I would put that question to the committee.
Right. I hadn't forgot that. I was going to bring that up. So is that going to be in the form of a motion or just a vote of the hands? How do we do that? Or how does everybody feel about it? I'm sure they approve of it. Nobody? Should we do that as a motion, Paul, or can we just do it as a vote by the committee?
I guess, Chair, I would ask for a motion so that I was clear on it for the record. And I see Mayor Van Gordon has his hand raised.
Mr. Mayor, you're up.
Yeah, I got to find the other mute button. I apparently double secret muted myself. I move that we direct staff to submit testimony around HB 3113 in alignment with what OMPOC has provided.
Second.
Motion moved and seconded. So let's have a show of hands of everybody that supports it. Yes. Say yes. Aye. How does it look on the screen, Paul?
It looks good. I don't see. Chair, if you could ask if anybody dissents.
Okay. Anybody against it? Motion
Not
passes.
seeing anyone.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Get that letter off, Paul.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chair. I will do that. If I can very, very quickly run through a couple of other pieces of legislation, it won't take very long.
All right.
So let me stop sharing the screen so you don't have to stare at that. So there are a few other bills that still have life that are related to transportation, and I'm going to just quickly mention those. Going down the list that we started with in January of the ones that were primary concern. House Bill 2095 is the legislation that would authorize all cities in the state to operate photo radar. That bill actually passed the House just yesterday. So I expect it will move forward to the Senate and likely pass the Senate also. But that was one that was also generally supported by this group and looks like it will become law. House Bill 3014, which is a bill that would allow schools to be reimbursed for forms of transportation beyond just school buses. In other words, alternative transportation costs if they provide other means besides school buses, such as walking school buses or other forms. Has a recommendation out of committee for passage. So that's encouraging. The e-bike rebate legislation also has a do pass recommendation at this time. House Bill 2101 that we've talked about, which would require and continue to fund ODOT's local fund exchange program. Unfortunately, it does not appear to have any life. It's not technically completely dead, but it hasn't had anything happening since January. Similarly, the bill that I mentioned back in January that would expand and modify the membership of the Oregon Transportation Commission appears to not have any further life. It hasn't had any action since January 12th. There are just a couple more here. The two Senate joint resolutions that I mentioned starting back in January, one which would have expanded the constitutional limitation on the use of state highway revenue, and the second that would modify the Constitution to require a public vote on any tolling project. Neither one of those appear to be moving forward at this time. So that wraps that up. I don't have anything else unless there's questions.
I have one hand up. That's Councilor Farr, or Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Mo, and thanks, Paul. This is good after all these years to be back on MPC. Just a quick question regarding legislative efforts. I spent much of the morning on the phone today with Alex Kyler, who's our legislative liaison. He's in charge of our legislative affairs. My quick question for you is, do you in any way to coordinate efforts with the jurisdictional legislative efforts, or is that something that we as the MPC commissioners need to do?
Commissioner, a little of both. Typically, the MPO is acting, and I as staff to the MPO are acting at the direction of MPC. So it's, again, your responsibilities to bring your jurisdiction's positions to this body's votes or direction to staff, such as we just received direction to submit testimony on House Bill 3113. I will say that over the years, I certainly have been involved in discussions with Alex and with the other legislative staff at the State of Eugene, City of Springfield. Sometimes we have coordinated those things when there's been specific concerns raised, but typically those concerns haven't been, common. There haven't been a conflict with something that the MPC has addressed. But a little of both, Commissioner Farr.
And thank you. That really does clarify the question. And in our legislative efforts, I see none of these bills on our agenda for what we're pushing at the legislative level. And I wonder if there's any coordination there could make it more effective a lobbying effort. We're pretty full. We're health and human services, and we're public safety and much land use outside the city limits. But I don't know if there's anything that we could do to enhance the efforts of MPC. If all the jurisdictions agree on it, the more we can lobby and leverage things at the legislative level, the better off we potentially could be. So no need to think about it too much at this point in time. I'll talk to Alex later on today when I talk to him and see what he thinks. But thanks for that clarification, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul, are you finished?
Unless there's other questions, Chair, that is the end of my legislative update.
Okay, then I'll move on to the ODOT update.
Thank you, Chair. I just have two quick brief updates. I think everyone is aware that we had our in-person public comment period. 2 dates were identified, both March 23rd. At least from my perspective, it was very successful. Had a couple of folks come into the office here that we done some presentations with, answered some questions and comments concerning the 24-27 draft STIP. We do have our second in-person public comment date, which is April 10th from 5 to 6:30. Unfortunately, that does coincide with a promotion that BEST is doing, which again, is beyond my control, and I'm assuming also beyond the control of BEST. Those dates kind of just coincide for the same evening. I'm assuming there'll probably be much less folks attending, but nevertheless, we still plan to have staff here to take on those public comments for those who have seen or want to be aware of that draft STIP. Second thing that I just want to mention, I think some of you may be aware of right now, we do have a new operations assistant director. Her name is Leah Horner. She started plus or minus, I believe, about 3 to 4 weeks ago. And she actually has been with ODOT before, back in 2014 as well as 2017. She worked as our government relations manager. And then beyond that, she has worked out of the governor's office, doing various roles like an economic advisor. She was the regional solutions director. And more notably, she was the deputy chief of staff. And so she joins us and we're happy to have her. And so you may be hearing a couple more voices with her name, and her name is Leah Horner. Those are the 2 updates that I have right now, and thank you.
All right. Any questions of Vidal? Good presentation. Thanks. We're sort of done. Any members have any questions within the group? Any ideas for the future? Any questions for today? Then I'm getting close to adjourning the meeting. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.